Shalom, shalom, and welcome to this fifth class of To Be a Jew. And we're looking at the continuing part of the, I believe it's the fourth chapter, which you'll find out in your book on page 52. And we're continuing to study To Be a Jew, and we're looking at right now the laws of kindness, the laws relating particularly to slander, revenge, and deceit. Our Savior tells us that during this period of time of the 3 weeks, our temple was destroyed because of a lack of brotherly love, or better yet, sinat hinam, unwarranted hatred, one sage to another. And this is what we find as a cause for a lot of the problems in today's Jewish community today, and that is that behind the scene, each rabbi, each leader tears each other apart and belittles one another in such a way that it becomes a destructive force within the Jewish community. The Torah tells us that you shall not go about as a talebearer among your people. That's found in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 16. A talebearer is one who goes about, I heard this and this about so-and-so, and goes spreading out rumors, whether it's true or not, among the community. One of the things that we see here is that even if it is true, it's a great sin, and it causes a lot of great bloodshed to take place, both in a physical sense, in a natural sense, as well as in a moral sense, figuratively. And you shall not stand idly by your neighbor's blood when that takes place. In other words, what are we to do when we begin to hear rumors? Blatantly stop it and tell them, you know what you're saying, sir, ma'am, whatever, it is LASHON HARA, or it is slander, and you know what, I don't want to be a part of that. And unfortunately, we don't have the chutzpah to be able to tell someone, you know what, I don't want to hear it. What you're saying to me right now, it falls in these categories, and I want that to stop. Especially through these means of Facebook and other social media, which is so common for people to speak out and type out negative messages about other people, and there's no way to defend it. There's even a site that people could actually put complaints and accuse you of things, and really there's no response, because once it's posted, it's not that easy to remove. As a matter of fact, it is a permanent record. And the consequences of such actions is much greater than even someone speaking LASHON HARA orally, that people can forget through time. So we're going into this aspect because it's so apropos as we're reaching the 9 days of the 3 weeks, that we need to understand that one of the greatest evil within our community is this little small member, that when it is ablaze, it creates an incredible fire of destruction throughout our community. There's even a greater sin than that, which is the prohibition of the evil tongue, LASHON HARA, the tongue that goes evil, as it were. This refers to go about discrediting one another, telling uncomplimentary things about one another, even if they are true. One of the things that we are most guilty of is to be able to diss fellow rabbis and fellow leaders just because they may not have a certificate or title as they do. And so it becomes an issue of LASHON HARA to discredit people without any knowledge whether or not they even have such titles. And this is a very, very dangerous thing. Instead of judging as to the knowledge, they judge by hearsay. And this falls also within the categories of LASHON HARA. This refers to one who goes about even if telling things that are true. One who speaks outright falsehood is called a spreader of evil, malicious, and false reports, or MOTSI SHEMRA. In other words, he's trying to destroy the character of that person by creating a false impression among others. And believe me, I have been the target of much MOTSI SHEMRA as well as much LASHON HARA. All you have to do is type my name and see all of the evils that they have spoken about me. But this issue is not so much of me in particular. It's about anyone that a person speaks evil or in order to destroy their character. There is something that has plagued the Jewish community, even from the destruction of the temple, and it's this area alone. that has caused the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. One who without protest listens to an evil tongue is as morally of a lower caliber as the one that got involved in this. As a matter of fact, the person who speaks is considered a moral leprous. Leprosy is a contagious infection that whoever comes near it can also receive this contagious disease. The tongue is very contagious. It's, like I said, wildfire. And all you have to do is just let it go, and it spreads, and the damage it does is sometimes irreparable. So one who stands by without listening, without any type of protest, basically becomes a co-participator of the LASHON HARA. Were it not for those willing to listen, no damage could be caused. To make snide remarks or pass on nasty gossips in any hateful way or even in jokingly way. Oh, I'm just kidding. You behema you. I'm just kidding. Borders on the category of LASHON HARA. He who insists upon praising a person before the person's enemy, encourage him to respond with criticism and fault-finding causes no good but only harm to himself. There are 4 types of persons that we are told that is not worthy of the divine presence, and God does not enter their midst. Idlers, insincere flatterers, liars, and those who talk with an evil tongue, LASHON HARA. It's forbidden to take revenge. It constitutes a violation of the Torah's commandment, and you shall not take revenge. That's in Vayikra, Leviticus 19:18. Our teachers advise us that if one is possessed by a strong desire of revenge, one should instead try to add to his own good qualities. Let this be your revenge, they said, for surely your enemy will be upset upon hearing the virtues extolled and your good name spread. On the other hand, if you resort to an ugly deeds, your enemy will rejoice at the shame and discredit you are causing yourself by therefore revenging yourself. I'm going to drink some water and join you if you want to say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah v'varov. It's forbidden to carry a grudge. This too is a transgression of the Torah. To harbor, this person did this against me and I'm going to pay them back, or have this bitterness feeling. It says very clearly, thou shalt not harbor a grudge. Leviticus 19, verse 18. It's also forbidden to curse another person in any language. And this is one of the biggest ailments that I have seen among many religious, pious leaders. We should be completely at ill when we speak such foul languages. Yes, my friends, using the F word, using that other word, using any type of word that is intended to hurt and harm. Even using the expression, you behema you animal you, can be deemed as actually a derogatory form of causing harm on a person. So we need to be very careful on what we say when it comes out of our mouth. Even though we may think of it, oh, this is such a cute way of expressing ourselves, we are called to be able to modify our behavior, our conduct internally, to be able to walk before our God who's holy and express ourselves in such a holy manner as others. It's forbidden to wrong others with words, to insult, to cause anguish or pain. To wrong one with words is greater than the sin to wrong one with money matters. For the latter is subject to compensation, while the former can be made good. In other words, the former is not. The latter is against a man's possession, the former is directed against the person himself. The Torah states, you shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God. Have a little bit of yirat shamayim, heavenly fear. Look how you're treating each other by your words. Wronging with words includes any statement that will cause another pain or distress. Any remarks that will hurt another by bringing up unpleasant reminders of the past, or will insult or embarrass a person when he hears it. Even derogatory names, even things that perhaps it was from that person's past. It's forbidden to call someone by a derogatory nickname. Even if the person whom is directed is already accustomed to hearing it, it is no longer embarrassed by it. Nevertheless, by so doing, if it's an embarrassment to others and he deliberately does it, in a derogatory form, it should not be done. It's forbidden to another to shame another person, to put them to shame on a public level, be it a child, an adult, whether by words or by deeds. How many times have we seen, even in Bet Knesset, where people leave the shul and decide not to come back because of the behavior, the actions, or the inactions of the leaders or other members of the shul? See, all of this has to really do with acts or laws of kindness in order to ensure that there is achdut, unity. When we don't get ourselves involved in this, there becomes a lack of unity, lack of disinterest, and there becomes this what they call divisions within the congregation and the community, and people's feelings are hurt, and rightfully so. We should be able to learn to deal with one another in a dignified and always positive manner. Of course, we're human, and therefore we should be always apt to be able to easily forgive when forgiveness is requested. Very good. Let's go to the next point. It's forbidden to steal another's thought, to deceive another person, even in non-monetary matters. Even examples of that stealing a thought is, for example, if I quote and say, well, this is all what I'm teaching, this all comes from Moshe's mind. No, it does not. That's why on the beginning of the video I said this is based on the materials and book of Rabbi Donin, to be a Jew. So that no one can say, well, Moshe says, well, this is Moshe's words. No. This is all based on Rabbi Donin's book and work, and I do encourage you to acquire his book and materials. It's a very good book. It has, I think it must be one of the biggest sellers in the Jewish market in English, as well as in Spanish. There's materials that are been found to be very, very useful for those people wanting to go through conversion. A man should not offer a gift knowing that that gift in advance will not be accepted by the party. If you know it's going to offend someone, don't give it. A man is prohibited in selling even to a non-Jew non-kosher meat if the non-Jew is under the impression that he's buying kosher meat. In other words, full disclosure should be presented. Don't deceive people by telling them one thing they're under the impression of another. A man's heart and a man's mouth should be the same, should be one, should be together. Obviously, we have problems with that in today's society. We say something with our mouth because it's convenient, and with our heart, just completely the opposite. We should learn to be completely one. That's what it means to be an integral person. A person whose feelings and thoughts and minds are one with what comes out of their mouth. Unfortunately, because of the hypocrisy that exists in today's world, we have this type of conduct. That people will say something differently than what's on their heart and their mind. Because obviously financial gain is maybe at risk, or gain of other forms is to their advantage. From the words, you shall have an honest hin in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 36, the sages derived this lesson of that your yes be yes and your no's be no. He must be a man of his word, not a promise breaker. In other words, there was a time that your word was your bond. I remember some time ago, someone had promised to financially help us. And apparently this person made all these types of promises to help us to get on television on a very, very national network based upon certain conditions which were met. Came out, I said, okay, here the conditions are met, where's the money? Didn't come out. Tells you that a person in such a state, whether sober or whether drunkenness, is a person that lacks integrity. It lacks what they call being emet with his word. His word means nothing. Obviously, we do make mistakes, we do commit errors, but when you commit an error, the good thing to do, the proper thing to do, is to apologize, to come forward and say, you know what, I did promise you this, but for whatever reasons I can't do it. I can't make it. Okay, you know what, don't worry about it, we'll move on. But to say absolutely nothing and retain as if nothing has ever happened is the self-deception and deception in his own or in their own mind that they think they have done absolutely nothing wrong. Such a man who does this lacks integrity, lacks the spirit of the sages, and lacks the spirit of a leader, of a true leader. Thus a man who says to a friend that he intends to give him a gift and then does not, lacks integrity. And in today's world, we have a whole bunch of leaders who lack integrity, my friends. And this is one of the basic aspects of the law of kindness. So that whenever a potential recipient took the promise at face value and believed that he would receive it, then he comes out completely brokenhearted. This is why it's very good to say, I will do this and I will do that. Bezrat Hashem, God willing. Not tying myself to a promise or a vow. A promise or a gift that was made to a poor man, whether it be small or large, whether it be of a sort that the poor man believed that they would receive it and took the statement at its face value, the benefactor may not go back on his promise. He or she must pay them. They're reliant upon that. A statement to take a poor man assumes the status of a vow, concerning which the Torah teaches, what proceeds out of your lips, you shall keep. This verse speaks of the truth, and it's in the heart. It says in Psalms 15, verse 2. It teaches us an even a higher level of ethical virtue, something that in today's political world is completely lacking. All we have to think about, how many of our own people have fallen to this vice of breaking promises, of saying things that were not true. We have to look back at the Ponzi schemes of the past that have crippled to a certain extent this economy and the faith in a person's word. One decides in his own heart to make a particular charitable contribution. One is duty bound to pay in accordance with the decision one made to oneself, even if one did not actually utter any words or promise. Many of you have said, you know what, I want to help this organization, the ways of Israel, Los Caminos Israel. And yet you pull back. And you said, you know what, and you look for this other excuse. You know what, you need to do what is proper before your conscience and God. If you make that type of commitment, follow through and do it and give and help. This is why many organizations today in Judaism, they're hurting because people have given promises and they have not come through with it. It's time to pay up what you have committed with your mouth. Let's go now to some other area which has to do with the law, with wages and work. And I don't understand why we have such a difficulty in this. And one of the biggest complaints I've always received, both in Latin America as well as here, is that for some reason, and please do not take this as offense, but for some reason there's a tendency among our people not to pay the employees their wages at due time. This is a big problem. The Torah commands us to pay the wages of a hired person at the agreed time. Delay constitutes a violation deoraita of the Torah itself, the written Torah. You must pay him his wages on the same day, before the sun sets. Deuteronomy 24:15. The reference is referred to the night laborer. In the case of a day laborer who collects his salary during the night, it says the wages of a laborer should not remain with you all night until the morning. Leviticus 19, verse 13. If a person is hired by week, a month, or year, one has only a night or a day after the work is finished to complete the payment, or as prior agreements. In other words, what was determined and agreed upon. A person is hired to perform some job, and in the course of his work causes loss to the employer, even if it's be through negligence in such a way that he is legally responsible from any damage incurred, it's a mitzvah, it's a good deed in the case of a moral duty for the employer to absorb, as it were, that loss or that damage. This applies in the law of lifnim meshurat hadin. In other words, refrain from collecting damages as it is written, so that you may go in the way of goodness. And that's in Mishnah, Proverbs 2:20. Refrain from doing harm to the employee. Why? Because the employee is always at a dependency upon the employer, who is able to pay his or her wages. If an employee is a poor person, it's a mitzvah even to pay him for the wages for the job on which the loss or damage was sustained. This is the way of the righteous, to keep the way of the Lord, to perform the deeds of righteousness and justice and lefnim meshurat hadin, which means that basically our labor forces, the way it's starting to change in this country, we are seeing a lot of problems with people not getting paid on time. We are seeing problems in where people are being deducted and harmed. this USA is changing very quick, my friends, and not in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. All based on moral, judicial, and at least from a Jewish perspective, it's going directly the wrong way. It's going to the left and to the tubes. Just as an employer is cautioned not to steal or cheat on the wages of his employee, so is the employee cautioned not to idle or waste time on the job, but to do his work conscientiously. And by the way, this ethical aspect also applies in the Christian world, that the Christian world has a similar ethical value in regards to this, because obviously they use our scriptures. And for that same reason, this basis is a universal rule, as it were. An employee is therefore not permitted to work at night and then hire himself out for the day unless, number one, he tells his first employer the conditions of employment. In other words, everything is all based upon what was agreed upon. He is not permitted to do anything that would weaken him or cause him to unable to do his work properly by the main employer, unless the employer is cognizant of the situation beforehand, before hiring him. Kindness to animals. Now we're changing from actually kindness to one another to kindness of employer-employee relationships, and now kindness to, you might say, the animal kind. The Torah prohibits torture or causing of pain to any living creature. And I'm going to say this for those of you Jews, basically in particular, or those of you watching me, who happens to have a very negative view on the non-Jewish person. In other words, the view that basically he's a goy. And I'm saying it properly, with the proper intention. He's a goy, as if it were he was just one level higher than an animal. As it were, if it was something, he doesn't have any spiritual or godly spark in him. He doesn't have the divine neshamat elokit, which I do not agree with that concept whatsoever. It was basically an innovation that came in from Chassidut and Baal Tanya, which I do not subscribe to whatsoever. And I would recommend those of you who wants to see the debate regarding this to go to Yeshiva University. And I'm trying to remember the Rabbi Ball, I believe his name was, who talks about the difference between the mystical concepts and the Rambam in regarding this. There are two different schools of thoughts here. And I subscribe to the rationale versus the more mystical side of this argument. And thus I personally see that every human being created in Hashem's image has Neshamat Elokut. Which I know those of you who will write to me will say, oh, no. But let me say this, that even on the level of an animal, they get more respect many times than a goy. And we need to change that across the board, because the way the Jewish world is heading is into a very negative aspect, and it can cause some repercussions down the line and foment certain hatred towards our community. That said and done, let's read what it says here regarding kindness to animals. The Torah prohibits the torture of causing pain to any living creature. One is duty-bound to save every living creature from pain and distress, even if it has no owner. It's hefker. An animal is inflicting pain or causing grief to human beings or a creature has a utilitarian value, the medical research. One is permitted to kill it. After all, the Torah does not permit the slaughtering. Does permit slaughtering of animals for food, for human consumption. Sorry about that, Peter, but unfortunately, we do have an okay from the one above to be able to slaughter for consumption. I don't know what you're going to say about that, but some people are carnivorous. You want to be vegetarian? All strength and success to you. Hunting as a sport historically has been looked upon with disdain as a violation of the spiritual forms and norms of Judaism, particularly if there is no utilitarian purpose, for it involves an element of cruelty to animals. So just hunting to kill? No. If you're hunting to kill to provide food, it's different. One who is responsible for feeding animals is forbidden to sit down to eat until he has fed his animals. This lesson is derived from the verse that says in the Torah that the feeding of animals is given precedence over the eating of man. It is also written, I will provide you grass in the fields for your cattle, and you shall eat and be satisfied, says in Deuteronomy 11:15. When it comes to drinking, however, we're talking about drinking some water, okay? The man takes precedence over the beast. When it comes to drinking, man takes precedence because man is less capable of enduring thirst and hunger. Here too, Scripture provides the basis. It is written, drink, and I will give your camels drink also. Genesis 24:14. The duty to show kindness to an animal is to avoid actions that would cause them harm or anguish. And this is found in many passages in the Torah, including, you shall not muzzle an ox while it's threshing. In other words, they also have rights to eat. You shall not plow with an ox and an ass. You shall not put unnecessary burden or an unequal burden upon one animal over the other. To spare it, and by the way, this also applies in the area of marriages, by the way. This is why the reason why a Jew and a non-Jew should not be married, because they have two different responsibilities that the Creator has provided them. A Jew has a different role in this world than a non-Jew. However, if a non-Jew decides to convert and become Jewish, then they have the right to share the same burden, but not contrary to that. To spare the feelings of a mother bird, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go, it says in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 6 through 7. The laws of Sabbath demands rest for the beast, and the laws of kosher slaughtering provides for the most painless and swiftest killing to avoid the slightest suffering to the animal. The biblical verse of Proverbs sums it up very simply in Proverbs 12:10. A righteous man considers the life of his beast. A righteous man considers the life of his beast. In other words, he is a pro-animal advocate. He does consider his animal. He does consider the beast of the field. An unrighteous man is a beast himself. In that sense, he has no morals. He is animalistic himself. In other words, he has no sense of right and wrong, and he will kill, slaughter, chop off, maim, whatever he wants. That's not the way of the Torah. That's not the way of God. Let's go now to acts of justice, because it's very important that we begin to practice acts of justice, because it's a way that we connect ourselves with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God Himself. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of a stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. Exodus chapter 23, verse 9. Anyone who mistreats or deceives a stranger, either monetarily or through words, is guilty of 3 transgressions. Now, it's interesting enough that the passage refers here as ger, the same word that's used to refer to someone who's in the process of conversion, who's becoming part of the people. Interesting enough, there is a prohibition to harm a person who is in the process of conversion, who is learning the ways. Oh, my friends, there are so many people, so many of the rabbinical leaders who are so guilty of this. And if you think that God does not take this harm seriously, open your eyes and see the greatest harm taking place throughout the Jewish communities throughout the world. I need not even mention Venezuela, nor Cuba, nor Bombay, nor other parts of the world. We Jews have an immense responsibility and burden upon us to treat those who are coming into the fold with the most greatest sensitivity necessary. As a matter of fact, we're commanded to love them even above that of a regular Jew, because they have no father, no mother except Abraham and Sarah. They have the dependency on God alone, and thus God wants you to help them. The responsibility that the Torah places upon us in the treatment of proselytes, converts, is great. We have twice been commanded to love anyone who enters the wings of divine presence, once because he has a category of a neighbor, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself, it says in Leviticus 19, verse 34, and once because he is a stranger, and you shall love the stranger, Deuteronomy 10:19. In addition to these 2 powerful commandments, there are five, if I'm not mistaken, five categories of people who are divinely protected by God himself. Among them are, of course, the orphans. Among them are also the poor. Among them also are the widowed. And among them is also the convert or the proselyte. It's forbidden to assault one another. One who assaults one another violates Torah commandments. Let me go back for a second about this issue of assaulting and doing harm to a convert or a person in the process of conversion. Even the fact of reminding them their past is actually inflicting harm to them. You should not remind them of their past. You should not remind them, oh, you were this. Once you know that they are converts, you must treat them as a 100% Jew. It's forbidden to assault another. One who physically assaults another violates the Torah commandments, and it is written, the wicked man shall deserve to be beaten, then the judge shall, but not exceed to beat him. Deuteronomy 25:2. The implication of that is beyond punishment inflicted by the court, which may not be excessive. It is wrong to strike another. He who lifts up a hand to strike another, even though he does not strike, is called wicked, rasha. Of course, a Jew is obligated to defend himself. But if one is a victim of the attack and sees another so victimized, he cannot save either himself or his friend from the attacker unless he strikes the attacker. It is permissible to strike him. It's self-defense. At the time when the laws regarding fair weights and measure, fraudulent selling practices, and usury laws were also enacted. This is the basis of the regulation of the Torah. You shall not have in your pouch alternate weights, larger and smaller. And this rule applies in a lot of the areas of monetary transactions. You must completely use honest weights and completely honest measures. Deuteronomy 13:5. The Talmud in Bava Batra 88a says that basically a shopkeeper must clean his weights clean at least twice a week, wipe his weights once a week, and cleanse the scale after each weighing to remove any accumulated residue. Why? Because that accumulation will change the actual weight of which he or she is selling. You must take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear sight and perverts the words of the righteous. Exodus 23:8. And here we have a very big issue. Because many times people come in the conversion process and they want to offer money to get themselves converted. And I know of rabbis who've taken not a little bit of money either. 10, 20, 30,000. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of rabbis here in town that I know of. You go to him and they'll convert you for a good $5,000 to $10,000. But because he takes that money, it's considered bribe. By most, it's considered a bribe for the purpose of conversion. And this becomes a very, very sticky road when you get into this. Obviously, you need to be able to repay a person's time that's dedicated in teaching, and there is the cost of a bed din when it comes together. But besides that, they cannot basically charge for conversion. Anything that comes must be done more of a tzedakah or a charitable contribution to the organization which they represent, or for the cost of the services that they employ to dedicate in teaching you. So you might say the worker is worthy of his labor, of his charges. Obviously, this is where we have a lot of problems, because some people have the heavy-mindedness that they feel they can charge $150 an hour as if they were lawyers. My friend, you're not a lawyer. You're a teacher. Bring it down, my friend. You're too expensive. And we need to change the mindset on this, because basically it's out of whack. Our whole country is out of whack because of the same mindset. It says very clearly, in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. Leviticus 19, verse 15. This precept makes it incumbent upon each person to judge his fellow man in all interpersonal relationship based on the scales of merit, and to give the other the benefit of the doubt, especially where a person's record has previously been beyond reproach. Even if his guilt be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, one should look for mitigating circumstances, something which in the world of Facebook does not happen, my friend. They judge you execute you, and after that, that's it. You're over for them, my friend. This is why there's such a consequence upon that person who decides to do those things before Shemayim. Be careful. If one sees another committing a sin and going astray, it is a religious duty to inform him. My friend, you're doing something here. Let me talk to you in private here. They reprove your neighbor in Leviticus 19, verse 17. One should not claim it's none of my business. I'm going to clear my eyes. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. No. If you see someone doing something wrong, you can come to him or her and be able to say some words to have some type of corrective effect. Do so. If you know he's not going to listen to you, don't waste your time. If you already know that. When one does reprove another in a matter between yourselves and ritual matter between man and God, it must be done privately and very gentle with kind words. There's nothing worse than unsolicited advice, especially knowing if a person has a very bad reputation before him when giving those unsolicited advice. When people ask me my advice, it's because they were looking for guidance. When I write to someone to seek their guidance, it's because I'm asking them specific questions for guidance in those areas. But to receive unsolicited advice, when not asked, don't do it. It's not recommendable. Whoever can erase the trace of improper deeds and does not do so violates the command of the Torah. This is only when one has the slightest reason to believe that he will be listened to, but if one knows his words will fall on deaf ears, it is forbidden to reprove such a person. If you know that they will not hear it, don't waste your time. If a certain person pays no attention to the reproof, to the reproof just as a religious requirement, mitzvah for a person to say that which is to be listened to, it's incumbent upon him to do it. Don't just say it. Do not reprove the fool, lest he hates you. Reprove the wise man, and he will love you. And sometimes it's not necessarily the reproof. Sometimes it's who does the reproof. And if you know that the person doesn't accept anything you say, don't reprove him. Let somebody else reprove him. Have somebody else talk to him that's closer to him to bring some sense into his mind. This is the way of the wise. Middle of the road. I want to talk about this about middle of the road because we're living in such extremes. Such extreme context, my friends. We have on one level a religious extreme, I would label it the Reform to this day, where basically you can do whatever you want in Judaism. You can eat treif, don't worry about it, you'll get there. You can drive on Shabbat, don't worry about it, you'll get there. We're talking about Shabbat with gas engine, fire-powered engines. We're not talking about electric cars here, which is a whole different discussion. But in Judaism, there's so many different movements, so many different Orthodox and non-Orthodox. When we talk about the middle road, I want to be very clear, it's within the perimeters of Orthodox. Yes, there are different levels of Orthodoxy, even ultra-Orthodox. Maimonides writes, lest a person say, sense jealousy, lust, and desire for honor or evil ways, I will separate myself completely from them and go the other extreme to the point where he refuses to enjoy pleasures of food by abstaining from eating meat and drinking wine, where he refuses to marry a wife, he's going to be single, or live in a pleasant home or wear nice clothing, but instead chooses to dress in rags. I'm going to be such a pious person, I'm going to look like a beggar. This too is an evil way, says Rambam, and it's forbidden to go that way. One who goes in such a path is called a sinner. My friends, we have a lot of sinners who are pious looking. We have also a lot of sinners who are very rich looking. Therefore did our sages ordain that a person must deny himself only that which the Torah has forbidden. But he must not forbid upon himself those things which according to the Torah are permitted. And concerning all such matters, King Solomon said, Do not be overly righteous and do not be overly wise, lest you be led to iniquities, or iniquity, singular. Extremism, my friend, within the concept of the Rambam, is the worst danger that always is present to the Jew, be he a convert or be he one who is born from cradle. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 16. Do you people understand? Do you understand for a moment that in old times it was not always this way, the black hats, the black coats and kapatas? As a matter of fact, it tells us, the sages tells us in Talmud, tells us very clearly that the sages would wear very colorful and joyous colors, completely opposite of today's black hat, black and white uniform that is so now into mode as the uniform, the reason of being a Haredi or Hasidim in this world. My friends, that's not the case at all. This is why in the Sephardic custom, the rabbis of old, today they're not following the Ashkenazic minhags and the black and white Haredim look because of so much of the pressures. But in the old times, they didn't wear that. As a matter of fact, many of the Orthodox rabbis, at least in Cuba, would wear guayaberas, very casual looking, colorful clothing. I mean, I'll just look at the Rishon LeZion. You don't see him wearing black and white. It's usually very royally blue, very luxurious colors. Why, my friends? Judaism wasn't this way. It was alive. It all had to do with the shtetl mindset and what was imposed upon the Jews of Eastern Europe, that they put these black clothing and that became their badge of honor, together with the yellow stars that they also wore with honor. It is really the imposition of Goyish customs which the Jews of old has taken as their new uniform. Let me say that again. It is the Goyish custom of back then that now they become, as it were, a uniform today. Wow! Incredible. So, can we say, in one way, that today's black hatters are really wearing the costumes and clothing of the goyim that they imposed upon them to separate them from being part of society? Yes. It's exactly what that represents. That represents what the Goyish world said, you must wear this, you are not full of life, you're full of death. Keep in mind, this is what Eastern European communities did to the Jews. Terrible thing. Now they've made it into a uniform of honor. Very similar to what Christians did with the cross. That they took a very negative, idolatrous symbol which represents death and destruction, and they exalted it into the symbol of life. Yes, my friend. This is exactly the parallels. Interesting, huh? For those of you who don't know, that's exactly what happened in the two communities. It says very clearly, do not be overly righteous. One translation has, do not be overly religious. Extremism, my friends, is not good. Walk the middle path. Walk the middle road. The best and the straight road that a person should train himself is the middle of the road. It's the middle of the road in our personality traits, the middle of the road in everything we do. And he who goes along this middle road is called a chacham, a wise man. A man must not feel ashamed before his fellow man. They mock him for worshiping the Holy One, blessed be he, for abiding by his commandments. In any case, one should not respond to such taunting with insolence or impudence, so that he himself does not acquire a habit of being impudent himself. Do not side with the multitude, a majority do wrong. Neither shall you bear witness to pervert justice in a dispute by learning towards the multitude. Although the biblical law in the context of judicial practice is its moral significance was broadly applied. The rabbis also derived a lesson from the literal meaning of the last three words, achrei rabim lechatot, and took themselves to imply that. except when it is to do wrong. One should follow the majority. And let me say this, because I'm going to do a video that has to do specifically with the venerations of saints and tzaddikim in one of my Facebook videos, a little bit different than the YouTube. I'm going to talk about this, how the majority of today's world is heading towards the you might say, the red line of idolatry, based upon justifications of passages which they feel justified to do, but something which in essence, in the spirit of the law, we are told to stay away from. A person must keep away from things that cause illness and train himself to do only those things that are healthy. In other words, smoking. By the way, we've been ruled already by various big rabbanim that smoking is dangerous to your health. We knew that by the general surgeon, but just in case halakhically you don't know this, a person who does not have the habit of smoking should not start it. It should be discouraged. A person who does not have the habit of being an alcoholic or into drinking should not be indulging themselves in alcohol, because that's also harmful to the health. So we need to have a balanced life. Unfortunately, in today's world, even within Judaism, those elements that tend to strengthen the drinking binge or the smoking binge is always putting our children at risk to become like they are. And we should break that somehow. We should start introducing in the yeshivas, be they Hasidic or be they regular Orthodox schools, that smoking is not to be tolerated. That profuse drinking and l'chaim should be put at a moderation to a level that they must get some type of clearance. That's not happening. Debauchery and drinking and yeshivas don't want to even go there. Take the utmost care and watch yourself scrupulously, it tells us in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9. Thus, excessive drinking, smoking, the abuse of drugs, or eating of foods that may provide harm to the health are forbidden from halachic point of view. These are our issues of sarkana. On Yom Kippur, it does not atone for transgression between man and his fellow man until the grieved party is pacified and forgives. The person who forgives is sought. However, duty-bound to forgive wholeheartedly. He must not react cruelty, for this is not the Jewish way. This is why you should always be open and quick to forgive. Be patient. That when someone comes to you and say to me, Moshe, I'm sorry, I did something wrong. To be open and anxious to forgive, just like our Heavenly Father is open and anxious to forgive us if we ask Him for forgiveness. Fortunately, the problem that we have in today's Judaism is that most of the leaders who offend don't ask forgiveness, and who, when offended, demands for it. It's not a one-way street, my friends. You want forgiveness, you have to forgive. You have to ask for forgiveness, also to forgive. It's a two-way street here. And it's not only one way. To hate evil is as much a virtue as to love justice. To hate cruelty is as much as a virtue to love mercy. To hate injustice is really an act of love to see justice take place. But it's not enough only to refrain from evil or to disdain the cruelty. One must also actively pursue justice and mercy, as is written in Psalms 34, verse 15, and through verses 37 through 27. Turn away from evil, that's step one, and do good. Be a good doer. Be a doer of good. Ma'aseh tovim. Do good to others. Stop. Put away the bad practices. Stop the hurtful attitudes and affecting negatively. Start doing good. As it says in Spanish, we have a saying, it says, haz bien a todo, no importa quién es. When you do good to everybody, no matter who it is, it's going to come back to you 100-fold. My friend, this is what Judaism is all about. It's about doing good. It's not about destruction. If you want about killing other people, go to Islam. They'll teach you how to hate other people. They'll teach you how to do jihad and take war and destroy other people. That's not the derek of Judaism. The ways of Judaism is peace. The ways of Judaism is love. The way of Judaism is God. God in us is the hope of the whole entire world. Shalom, shalom.